Hi everyone, and welcome back to season 3 of Commerce Meets Law, a podcast we talk about various commercial topics and how they interact with the legal profession. Today's episode is a conversation with the incredible Mary Bonsor, founder of Flex Legal, which is an online platform to connect pre-vetted lawyers and law students with law firms and general counsel for a flexible on-demand service. Before starting Flex Legal, Mary was a solicitor within the property litigation team at Winckworth Sherwood LLP and decided to jump into the world of entrepreneurship at just 2 years PQE. So in this episode, we firstly start by discussing Mary's initial entry into the legal profession and what attracted her to property litigation in particular, when she first had the idea for Flex Legal, which might be sooner than you think or than you originally predicted, and why she decided to finally take the plunge of starting it in 2016, the model of Flex Legal from sort of a business perspective and how it works, and as well as discussing the key mission of the company. We then talk about the similarities and differences between law and entrepreneurship and which one Mary prefers, having experienced both now. And finally, her future goals for Flex Legal and the legal profession as a whole. Mary started off in this episode by saying that her superpower is enthusiasm. And I couldn't agree more because her incredible energy really did rub off on me and created such a free-flowing conversation. So I hope that her superpower rubs off on you as well. Just a quick request before we get into the conversation. I'd really appreciate if you'd kindly give the podcast a follow and a rating on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to these episodes, as it really helps Commerce Meets Law reach more listeners. Without further ado, I thoroughly hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you right at the end. Hi, Mary, and welcome to Commerce Meets Law. Really excited to speak to you on the podcast today. So our first question is always an icebreaker, which is, in your opinion, what is your superpower?
Ooh, I like that. My superpower, I think, is probably enthusiasm. I will be eternally enthusiastic about the world.
I love that, and I feel like I could sense that from the moment we started the call. So that's definitely one that shines through. And before we get on to talking about Flex Legal and all the work that you do now, I want to take a couple of steps back to kind of figure out how you got here. So could you tell me a little bit about sort of your interests and passions growing up and when you first thought the legal profession could be a place for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, as lots of people do when they sort of go into law, there were a couple of things of why I wanted to become a lawyer. One was I really enjoyed helping people and wanted the world to be a better place. And two, I loved the thought of sort of problem solving and being intellectually stimulated in my career path. So they were the two driving forces, but I didn't know much about a career as a lawyer until I did a bit of work experience post university. And then I did my GDL, LPC, and was lucky enough to get a training contract at Winckworth Sherwood.
Amazing. And in terms of the firm that you decided to qualify at, why did you sort of choose that firm in particular, and how easy or hard was it for you to get that training contract?
Yeah, it was really hard, and I think it's only got tougher. So
Yeah.
so I guess I found getting a TC was a bit like a chicken and egg scenario. Everyone kept saying you need experience to get experience, and I kept falling down at that point. So what I did was just try and attend loads of insight days and anything that I could, just to kind of build up my CV. I put my letters through lots of high street firms and managed to secure a 2-week placement at a high street firm. And then that sort of snowballed and led to more and more different bits of work experience. And what's quite funny is, if I look back at my career with Winckworth Sherwood or getting my TC, they actually said no to me originally. And I then replied and said, please, I'll wait a year. This is the firm for me. I know it is. I love the sectors that you work in. And then they came back and said, okay, you can come the year later. So I guess there's a lesson in that of never give up and keep persisting.
Yeah, I love that. And what was it that you had that conviction that it was the firm for you? What was it about that firm?
So I really love it. It's a middle-sized firm, so they wanted people
Mm,
who were really going to get stuck in and were happy to sort of take responsibility. And they also did quite random sectors. So the Winckworth Sherwood has a department which is parliamentary agency, as well as education, as well as housing. So they work a lot with the public sector as well as the private sector, and I
mm.
really loved that. And really loved the thought of doing a seat in parliamentary agency and having a kind of impact on the laws going through. So that's and I kind of grew up in a world of politics. So that was why I was so sure that the firm was for me, and desperate to become a trainee there.
And I think that, just goes to show that there's these firms that everyone knows about, whether that's Magic Circle or really big firms in the city, and actually that, may not be, it might be the firm for you, but also there's only so many other firms out there. And I think it takes that time to research and to get that experience and go to these open days to actually see which path might be right for you. And it might not be the same as your friend or your colleagues at university, which is such a key one in your story.
I thought I wanted to go to a big silver circle firm, but as soon as I
Mm,
started doing interviews there, and they asked me,
yeah.
just one of the questions was describe the credit crunch to your granny, and I couldn't do it. And I realised that for me, the bit of law that I really wanted to get involved in was more the sort of personal area, like employment or private clients or
Mm.
the relationship building bit, rather than the corporate and commercial world.
Absolutely. And you decided to qualify into property litigation. So could you tell us a bit about why you sort of decided to go down that route and why you thought that was the seat for you?
Yeah, and again, I think being open when you start your training contract, and um, just being open to every different department is really important, because I never would have predicted that I would have become a property litigator. I was
Yeah.
desperate to do employment, and that was a seat I really wanted, but I never got a seat in it. So I then did property litigation as my full seat and absolutely loved it, and thought, actually, this is awesome. Really enjoy the litigation bit. I got to go to a few big cases and trials and go to court, and I
Yeah.
just found it really exciting. And so
Mhm.
so then was really, really happy to qualify into that department.
That's super interesting. And I think what I really want to get to talking about is obviously your journey at Flex Legal. And I think what I found really interesting was that, sort of 2 years PQE, when people are sort of still just, getting their foot into being an NQ, being a lawyer, being qualified, you decided to start Flex Legal, which is, at the time must have been quite a fearful move, but also quite a bold one. So could you tell us a bit about where that journey began, how you thought, actually, what, it's time for me to start this venture?
Yeah, so I had the idea of Flex when I was a law student and desperate to get that TC and experience, and
Mm,
really struggled. And again, law schools in London are right next to all these big law firms, and I was desperate to even just to go in and do a few hours and help. So that was sort
yeah,
of how the idea started. And then when I qualified, my law firm was next to a law school, so I'd always see students outside my window and be like, I know you want experience, where's the kind of tech platform to connect the two?
yeah,
But then it took about 2 to 3 years of brainstorming on weekends and putting a business plan together and speaking to people before I was
yeah,
sort of brave enough to leave my career as a lawyer. And we went, actually, I met my co-founder, who was a technologist and who was brilliant, and we raised, I think it was 150K from individuals to get going, and that was the moment I could kind of leave my career as a lawyer, and have a little bit of investment to kind of pay a small salary to get going. So it was, yeah, it was sort of mad thinking back and going back to Marmite sandwiches again. It's a 2 year PQE lawyer, but
yeah,
it was well worth
yeah.
it.
And I think that point you highlight is so interesting because, when you read about companies, you see that, oh, it's one of the fastest growing companies, and you kind of see that growth once people know about it. But what you're highlighting is, that time when you are preparing and you're thinking about it, and all those evenings and weekends when you're working on the idea, but no one really knows about it yet. It's not out in the world. It's sort of, being baked in the oven, and it's not quite out, which I also think is such an important part of the story. And in a nutshell, for anyone which is a very small minority, I'm sure, who haven't come across Flex Legal, could you just explain the concept in a nutshell and what it is that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So Flex Legal is an online platform, and we connect law firms and in-house legal teams to lawyers and or paralegals on demand. And then we launched a social mobility trainee scheme too. So we now can help people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds actually qualify as solicitors in-house. And we've had 100 trainees through that scheme, which is something we're really, really proud of. And they get to qualify in awesome companies like Diageo or Unilever. So it's really cool.
And just to understand the model a little bit more, so in terms of a client approaching you, is that when they sort of require, let's say they're on a deal and they require a little bit of extra help, or is it that they are fully needing someone to work, within their firm for a number of years? How does that sort of process work?
Yeah, it's a bit of both. So if you think of big organizations and big teams, there's always going to be maternity leaves, paternity leave, sick leave. So we sort of fill in the gaps when they have employees going off for certain periods of time, and or legal work is so hard to predict. So with big cases, you never know how many documents a client might give you that you're going to have to go through. So it's really, Flex is all about having that ability to sort of flex your resource and need up and down, and then turn it off when the project comes to an end.
So if I'm sort of understand it, I guess, people will be familiar with the idea of like contractors or people who work on a temporary basis, where that's for, a bank or a PR firm, anything like that. Was that sort of the idea here?
Exactly. So that the idea from the client side is exactly that, project-based work and being able to kind of flex your resource up and down. And then from the candidate side, for sort of juniors and paralegals, it's about building up your experience so that you can get a TC. Or from a lawyer's perspective, it might be working in a different way and a bit more flexibly. So you might want to do a project for 9 months and then take the summer off, for example.
And you spoke a little bit about obviously the social mobility scheme and also the idea of both paralegals, trainees, and lawyers working at Flex Legal. What does that ratio look like? Is it more people who are looking for work experience to then get a TC, or is it actually 50-50 in terms of also lawyers who just want a more flexible career?
Yeah, so it started off all paralegals. So that was where our sort of mission began. But now it's very much 50-50. So we have anyone from the very start of their career right up to people retiring, and do the whole spectrum in between, which is really nice. We always say from acorn to oak tree, and we cover cover the spectrum.
And when you think about it, and when I sort of came across the idea, I thought, why do you think this hasn't really been done before? Because, the legal profession's been around for so long, and there's always been this sort of demand where projects, you need a couple of extra hands. So why do you think Flex Legal has been so successful and has like found this gap in the market?
Yeah, I think the concept of contractors, as you said, is nothing new, but the way we did it was new. So we built a tech platform, we had little profiles with videos, and we've automated everything. We've automated all the admin in between. So that was very unique when we launched Flex in 2016, and was definitely a kind of first in terms of really investing in technology to make the recruitment process super simple. And a good example of that is we had a request for 150 paralegals within a week, and that's where you need the technology to be able to manage it, get the compliance right, make sure everyone's got their right to work checks, their DBS checks, as well as then do all the timesheets and of the project. So that's where you can really see how kind of tech plays a part.
Yeah, and I think that, we're in the age now where everyone is talking about tech, and technology is the next big thing alongside AI in general as well. So I think that idea of bringing tech within something as age old as the law and the legal profession is such a key one for sure. And I also want to talk about this idea of, entrepreneurship. And a lot of times now, especially within within most professions, people want that ability to start something of their own, whether that's a side hustle or eventually a full-time thing. And obviously, you also have won awards within entrepreneurship as well. So, can you tell us a little bit about sort of how you view yourself? Do you view yourself now as an entrepreneur, or is a part of you still like, actually, maybe I'm more of a lawyer than I am an entrepreneur?
I think I'm definitely the entrepreneur, and a risk taker. And most
Yeah.
lawyers tend to be quite risk adverse, but I would say I'm sort of the opposite of let's just give it a
Mhm.
go and see what happens. But you're so right. I think what's great is now setting up a business is so easy, and we see a lot more of our candidates coming through having little side hustles, which is
Yeah.
brilliant, because I think it makes you a better lawyer because you're more commercial and you understand what a balance sheet is, what a P&L is, how what might impact a business's growth. So I think all these things actually make you a much more rounded lawyer when you come to advising your
Mm.
clients. So I think they can come hand in hand.
Absolutely. And when you are sort of reviewing, I guess on the candidate side of sort of ensuring that you have candidates who are up to that particular kind of level or whatever expertise is required, how do you sort of do that process? Is that done by people who are lawyers like yourself, or is that actually done by a mixture of people with all sorts of backgrounds?
Yeah, so majority of people at Flex are either lawyers or recruitment backgrounds, so we have a bit of a
Right.
mix.
Yeah.
But for us, the process is interview. There's a few tests as well that you have to get through, and then you do little video recordings. And really, it's about we want we need to ensure a sort of certain level of quality for our clients, and we
Hmm.
do all that before we sort of get someone onto our platform. And then when you're on our platform, the way it works is you get text messages about roles, and you can just say yes, no, fill out your availability, and sort of we then match you to the right roles that come in.
And I think, a lot of people who are listening, or perhaps who are aspiring lawyers who are making all these TC applications, one of the also alongside, expertise is that idea of culture. Every firm is unique in terms of its culture and things like that. So, as a company which is all about flexibility and people moving around, how do you ensure that the person who is joining a particular firm is able to adapt to that culture and that, those firm values? How do you train them in sort of the soft skills approach?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. And I think that's where you've got to get to know your clients really well and go to the
Mm,
clients' offices and get a feel for the way people work. And each business and company and law firm is different. So trying
yeah,
to really understand what they want is really key to making it work, because often we're a people's business, so often the
yeah.
kind of cultural fit is just as important as whether you're technically a bit able. And so
Mm,
we go and visit all our clients and make sure we do a sort of go and see their office, understand their business, get a feel for them.
mm,
And then we also, when we interview people, we always say, what's your dream? If you could name 3 companies as your dream companies, where would they be? Because that gives you
yeah.
a feel for what someone's looking for as well. And then with our trainees, we run a readiness program, which is a 3-week scheme, upskilling them before they step into their companies. And part of that is really understanding their company. So they do a whole presentation and pitch about the company that they're joining and the finances of it. Um,
Like a mini assessment center
exactly.
about the
Yeah.
firm.
Yeah.
Okay, that's amazing. And in terms of from then a client's perspective, is it that the client tells you, we're looking for this sort of person with this level of expertise, or do they also give you the detail of like what their personality should be, or what kind of fit they're looking for from a cultural perspective as well?
Yeah, a bit of both. We'll
Mm,
say we'll understand what the role is that they're doing, and then we'll ask questions like explain the person who's fitted in really well and what's been their characteristics or attributes. And so then it gives you something tangible. And most of them are quite similar. It's sort of proactivity, enthusiasm, willingness to learn, team player. but then you do sometimes get more interesting answers as well. So I think it's really important to just ask lots of questions before we do a placement.
In terms of sort of from like a business perspective, I guess firms like whether it's A&O Sherman or other firms have these programs now where they've started their own thing of, having those like consultants, or when they're bringing on people on temporary basis. Where do you fit into that in terms of sort of, do you see that as competition, or do you see that as something where actually your model is being incorporated by other law firms? How do you sort of view that?
Yeah, it's interesting. So a lot of the captive ALSPs, which is the law firm's sort of flexible models, are there to help the law firm and then help the law firm's clients. Whereas Flex, until recently when we were acquired by Mishcon de Reya, we've been very sort of neutral and can work for both law firms and in-house clients. And actually when Mishcon acquired us, one of the discussion points was us saying to Mishcon, look, we still want to work with other law firms, we still want to work with in-house teams, and they were absolutely fine with that. They were like, of course, you don't need to share your data with us, you can still be independently run, and that was really important. So I think that's a big difference. But are they competitors? In a funny way, they are competitors, but for me, I look at it as the more we can all do together, the bigger the market grows. So it's actually a plus, not a minus, to have competition.
And just to play devil's advocate slightly, I guess from the perspective of, especially I guess the generation where it was all about job security, it was all about, being in one profession, in one job for a number of years. And of course things are changing now, but in an economy where there is that level of, people, there is so much competition in every profession. Are there, how do you sort of balance that ability to, obviously flexibility, which is at the core of your business, but also that idea that, say, a lawyer has a job for maybe 6 months, how do they sort of ensure that they're going to get another one in an amount of time? Is there sort of reassurance, or is it very much like, if there's availability, you get it? How do you sort of reassure candidates on that side?
Yeah, I think what you find is at the moment, the main places that people go for a sort of more flexible model is either when they get a bit more senior and they're not in a rush for that security, or they sort of want more flexibility because of children or because of caring responsibilities or because of other things, and or if they're at the junior end when they're sort of hungry for any role and just want to get stuck in. So we don't tend to find people who are looking for long-term job security joining Flex, because it probably isn't right for them, is the honest answer. If you there's got to be another reason of why you want this flexibility. And then most consultants get paid because you don't have the employee benefits of private healthcare or as higher pension contributions. What tends to happen is you get paid a higher day rate as a consultant, which means if you have these moments of a month where you're not working, you've sort of planned that out and been paid a bit more. So that's how most consultancies work, because you don't have the certainty of job security.
Yeah, I think that's really key and interesting to hear. And like you say, it's that Flex Legal to kind of think, okay, what is the target market here? Who are the people that this is right for? And obviously segmenting that is really key as well. You spoke about, of being acquired by Mishcon and having had so many different sort of, successes over the years. Where do you see Flex Legal going in the next 5 years? What is it that you sort of want to do next, or what are the goals for the business?
Yeah, so our mission and vision has always been really clear, which is we enhance careers to change lives. That's our sort of motto. And so in that sort of vision and mission, I think we can sort of start looking at slightly different careers, but in legal. So we've recently launched a COSEC trainee scheme, and a kind of company secretary senior consultancy end as well. And then we'll look at what other skills do people in the legal world need, and that might be project management, it might be AI skills, it might be legal ops skills. And I think we'll sort of start branching out to help offer different skill sets within legal, but our sort of area and industry will always be legal, and it will always be about enhancing careers to change lives. That's our sort of key vision. So that's I could see a world where Flex has, you know, we have paralegals, lawyers, trainees, COSEC, legal ops, AI engineers, but all focused on legal one day.
I love that. And I think that it's going to be needed, especially with the inception of AI disrupting every industry. It is definitely going to be within the law as well. And I think there are so many changes to come for which lawyers will need to have more skills than what they're currently being taught, whether that's through their degree, through the SQE, or even during their training contract. They may not be exposed to all the skills that they'll then need during their career as well. In terms of Flex Legal and looking at the sort of business side of it, I guess a lot of people who are currently either practicing law or are thinking about it and also have an interest in entrepreneurship might be listening to the episode. So what do you think have been the most transferable skills from your life as a lawyer, which you've really been able to use in business, and it's been sort of an asset for you?
Yeah, good question. I think trying to, well, I think a few things. I think a really good lawyer really understands their clients and is often quite curious. So it's often about asking questions to really understand the problem. And that might not be what someone's saying. It might be you have to sort of uncover more facts, which is not from the kind of initial comments. And that's really key for entrepreneurialism and getting an idea out there and testing product market fit. So there's definitely that I found quite transferable, of just sort of I suppose selling and building up relationships with clients. And then I think, and I don't know if this is true across everyone, but the resilience of becoming a lawyer, it's hard work and it's a lot, and it can be long hours, and it's a lot of training and doing research and just, often you have a bad day for whatever reason and you just have to pick yourself up and carry on. And that's all part of being a founder as well. It's the resilience and the sort of and that comes back to the superpower, I think, of you've just got to keep that enthusiasm and positivity going, because there will be ups and downs both as your career as a lawyer and as a founder entrepreneur.
And on the flip side, obviously you started Flex Legal 2 years PQE, so you had some experience, but it wasn't sort of a decade in law and then switching over to something completely new. So for someone who is thinking about that sort of entrepreneurship and jumping onto that and is currently within the law, do you think that they should actually wait more and gain more experience and then do it, or do you think it's actually better to do it as soon as possible and then sort of just jump right in?
I don't think there's a right or wrong. I think the benefits of doing it earlier on in your career is you're not worried about going back to having no salary or very low salary, and it was with my case, it was pre-family, pre-mortgage, those big things in life, which might have made me think twice before doing it. But then later on, you've also got lots more wisdom. You know a bit more about what you want. You probably have tested and thought about the idea for longer. So, I think it's really down to individual circumstances, but it's never too late, and B, it's never too early, in my view.
And like you say, there's so many things and factors to consider. But when you have that desire and when when the time is right, there is that sort of gut instinct telling you. And of course, you got to think about, do you have the financials and do you have enough to support yourself through that journey? Because of course there can be ups and downs, things can go wrong, and the business may not be an immediate or overnight success, so you want to account for that as well. But overall, that we've seen this trend now of a lot of people within the law, not just, even if it's not entrepreneurship, but building a personal brand, becoming content creators, going into all sorts of things. So do you think that more lawyers should be entrepreneurs, or should kind of focus on becoming more entrepreneurial in general?
Yeah, I do. I think it's a skill set you can learn, and I think there's so much benefit for lawyers who are more entrepreneurial, and entrepreneurialism is a massive word, but actually you can be very entrepreneur. It's one of our values actually at Flex. And what we mean by it is in your day to day, always be looking for continuous improvement. So if you're doing a process, can you do it better? Can you do it more efficiently? Is there a different way of thinking about this? And I think that mindset is actually really important for any job, especially when you join a business, because you're a fresh pair of eyes looking at something for the first time. So trying to always be thinking, why do we do it this way? Could we do it better? Is only going to add value.
And from a law firm's perspective, as you said, you go to client sites, you interact with them. Do you think that law firms in the structure are doing enough to encourage entrepreneurship within law, kind of within their trainees and especially their younger talent? Or do you think that there's some strategies they can use to do more of that?
I think there's definitely been a change since I started my career as a lawyer, where there is more emphasis on it. So you've got things like Fuse, which A&O launched, which is their kind of incubator. You had MDR Labs, again, which was a sort of an incubator for startups. And that was all very new and really exciting at the time. So I do think now you hear more and more about law firms sort of trialing out their employees coming up with ideas and trying things. So I think it depends on the firm, but I definitely do. I see it at Mishcon a lot. They're very entrepreneurial, and they're very they love people who kind of come up with ideas and want to try something.
And we've actually had a couple of trainees and associates on the podcast from Mishcon as well. And I remember talking about, whether it was them hosting sort of book signings or talking to authors and encouraging trainees and associates to do that, or whether it is bringing them into conversations about where the firm should be going, because, they are going to be the future of the firm, and not just leaving that to senior management, who of course have the experience, but the younger talent have, those new ideas or ways of working which can be enabled. So I think it's that partnership and involving everyone as much as possible. And on the kind of just before we go into our rapid fire, I think this idea of flexibility is something that's hotly debated, especially now post-COVID. There is one camp which is all about that hybrid working and flexibility, and there's the other camp where it's like, oh no, we need to go back to the old structure. And as the founder of Flex Legal, where do you see that in terms of what way firms should be going? Should they be encouraging more flexibility, or should it be a firm to firm thing? What's your take on it?
Yeah, I'm probably a bit in the middle. So I think pre-COVID, it was too inflexible, 5 days in the office, and people could never work from home, especially in the legal sector. Post-COVID, it's gone too far, in my view, of everything hybrid and everything flexible and work 5 days at home. I think there's a happy medium where it's probably 3 days in the office. And the reason I say that is I think culture is really important, and it's very hard to build a good culture with everyone off in different bits of the world. And I also think for learning and knowledge sharing, and it's a lot easier in person, but there is always a place for flexibility as well. So, I've got 2 young kids, and being able to pick them up and drop them off at school early on is also really important to me. So, there's got to be a balance between some flexibility and some kind of going into the office time.
For sure. And I think especially for younger trainees and people entering the profession as well, I think it's so key to have that ability to be able to just ask questions, go to a supervisor and just know there are other people there who they don't have to arrange a Zoom or a Teams meeting with, but actually they can just, knock their door and just ask a quick question. And there's so much value in that as well. Before we go on to our rapid fire, I guess a lot of people will be thinking, within lawyers are they're infamous for having long working hours, and so are entrepreneurs. So I guess as someone who's done a bit of both, where, do you have longer working hours now, or did you have it as a lawyer? And, is there anything that you miss about being a lawyer now that, you're more on the entrepreneurship side?
Oh, yeah, I do. I interestingly, I still get my lawyer fix from employment law. So now with Flex, there's often some, employment law changes or things we need to be aware of. So that's really nice. I still like being a lawyer and using that. To which was harder work. So honestly, the honest answer was like both have been. I found in litigation, when there was a big case which I really wanted to win and wanted our client to win, I would happily stay in the office and get stuff done, which needed to be done. And then similar with Flex, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So there are times when it's working late, but I do always sort of also make time for the important things, so exercise and having time with my kids. And I think that balance is so important as well. So which one was harder? I don't actually know. I would say both equally is
yeah, the lawyer answer of it depends.
Yeah, exactly.
And like you say, every job has its challenges, and this idea of a dream job, of course you want to enjoy it most of the time, but there's always, like you say, those late nights, and yeah, that's not going to be every day, but there are moments of that, of course, as you say. And I feel like your enthusiasm rubbed off on me, because I feel like I've had so many questions, but I will finish off with the rapid fire. So our first question is, what does an ideal weekend in your life look like?
Friday night in with a pizza, spinning class on Saturday morning, and then lunch with some friends, a long lunch with friends, and then hanging out with my kids on the Sunday.
Oh, I love
Mix.
that. Perfect. And the next one is, if you could relive one day of your life, which one would it be?
I think it would have to be either my wedding day or the day my children were born.
Oh, yeah, of course. And the final one is, what are the top 3 travel destinations on your bucket list?
Would love to go to Japan. That's definitely on there. Cuba, and actually I'd love to go to Russia as well.
Wow, I love that. It's very, very eclectic mix.
Yeah,
Very
a
nice.
bit of everything in there for you.
Yeah, of course. And on that note, Mary, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It was so interesting to hear about your journey as a lawyer, but also everything you've done with Flex Legal, and the success it's seen has been incredible to see. So congratulations on that, and wishing you more and more success over the next decade.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for having me.
On that note, thank you so much for listening to this episode, and a massive shout out to Mary for coming on the podcast and gracing her with her time and her incredible energy and enthusiasm. If you enjoyed this episode as much as I did recording it, please do let me know by emailing commercemeetslaw@gmail.com or with a DM on Instagram at commercemeetslaw. And you can also reach out to us on our website with the same name, which will be linked down in the description as always. Finally, for extra summer content, do check out the Commerce Meets Law YouTube channel and our TikTok. For now, take care, goodbye, and I'll see you very soon on the next episode.